Awesome. Cool. We're going to kick things off. We've got quite a few people waiting for us online. Thanks very much for joining us for our April Snowflake user group. Before I kick things off, I just want to get a show of hands. Who's coming for the first time this evening? Oh, that's wicked. That's wicked. Cool, man. That's great. Cool. Well, welcome to the Snowflake user group. So hopefully for you, this will be all very novel and new. For the rest of you that have come to previous user groups, it's the same format, unfortunately. So just a little bit about the user group. So why do we exist? So we're here to discuss best practices to grow your professional network. So this is a great opportunity. We've got all sorts of people here, from students to CTOs to heads of IT to senior business managers, great data engineers, analysts. So it's a great smelting pot for you to kind of network and learn from each other. And hopefully to stay current with what's going on in Snowflake. Like, their release cadence is kind of ferocious. So we'll touch on some of those things tonight. If you haven't joined the user group, and most of you should have to be in the room, there's a QR code. For all of you that are new, there's lots of QR codes. So, keep your camera at hand. Let me introduce myself. So my name is Douglas. I work for a company called Data Lab. We're a Snowflake partner. I'm a Snowflake data superhero. So that just means you spend a lot of your time writing blog posts, advocating for Snowflake and running things like user groups, and basically just nerding out quite a lot of the time. I run it with one of my partners at work, Riza, and we've been running it now for about 2.5 years. So the user group doesn't work and it doesn't function if we don't have people to come and speak and to nominate themselves. I've said it before previously, like, I don't want to be up here talking every week. Luckily, we've had some really great people from the community come and share their stories. So, if you've got something interesting, and it doesn't have to be the world's best, like, a use case, it can just be something that interests you, something that you're passionate about. That passion will come over to the audience and what you're talking about. So if you've got interesting case studies or innovative use cases, or you just want to talk about a best practice or something that you've learned, there's an opportunity. Just drop us a line, and we can organise for you to come and present something at the user group. As I mentioned, there's loads of QR codes. Please make sure you join the chapter so you'll stay up to date. When we publish new events, then they'll get emailed to you. If you go and look for us online, you'll find us in the EMEA region, and you should find us under South Africa. That screenshot's a little bit old now. There's a few other user groups now. For those of you who don't know, we've set ourselves some KPIs this year. As a user group, we want to make sure that we've got a vibrant community, that it's growing, that there's a lot of interest, we can do more interesting things. The larger the user group, the more we can advocate for Snowflake to give us more funding to do, like, cooler stuff. So we want to grow our membership to 1,000. We want to get, on average, 100 people to attend the events. That's both here in person and online. We want to run this in 2 locations. So currently we only run it in person in Cape Town, but we're going to run it in Johannesburg as well. We're going to run 10 events from February through to November, so that we can all get a break over Christmas. And then we're aiming, as we hit some of these KPIs, to celebrate those with some decent after parties. So how are we tracking towards those KPIs? So as of about 2 hours ago, we've got 448 members. Over the 548? We've got, on average, we have 86 people attend the events over the course of this year. So that's only 2 events so far, so it's pretty good. We've only run it in Cape Town. This is our 3rd event, and we've had 0 after parties, and we will work on that. Just to give you an idea of the breakdown as well, and it's really interesting, again, like, I'm going to start nerding out on numbers now. But it varies from event to event. So, like, this is the split in terms of our February event in person versus online. So clearly loads of people are still on holiday and they decided they'd join online. Last month's event, we had majority of people in person, and looking at the numbers tonight, we're probably going to have similar kind of breakdown. In terms of how we're tracking towards our membership goal, we are above that line, which means that we're heading in the right direction. And this is a call to action for everybody here. Please bring a friend. I know that some people have brought a friend and continue to bring friends. Bring a friend, nerd out, show them what you're interested in. You might change their lives. We have a LinkedIn user group. that you can join. Again, this is purely for us to be able to communicate and for you to be able to have conversations with your peers in a forum on a more regular basis. And these events we record and we put them up on a YouTube channel. And every time I say that, I sound like one of my children who's publishing God knows what on YouTube. So that's what the user group is all about, and it only exists because you guys come and you make an effort to be here. In terms of some announcements and upcoming events, so we're on our third event here for April. We haven't got a speaker currently for May. June, we are going to commit to running an event in Johannesburg, and we'll get someone. So we've got 2 people that we're having conversations with who are going to hopefully fill those slots. But July through to November, if you want to come and talk about interesting Snowflake use cases, please let me know. If any of you are going to get the opportunity, Snowflake's biggest event of the year is Snowflake Summit. It's in San Francisco from the 1st to the 4th of June. If your employers really want to send you on a jolly, then go there for a week, enjoy yourself, or hang around. If you do want to go and you want to save your employers some cash, there's a QR code there, or you can use that promotional code and you can get yourself $400 off of a ticket. Some interesting webinars that are coming up. These might be of interest to you, they might not, but just to let you know that there's a constant stream of webinars that Snowflake run. Anyone in finance? Cool, then this one's for you. Interesting webinar all around how you can use finance with Snowflake Intelligence to help you answer all of those interesting accounting problems. Let me just move on. If any of you are using SAP and you're interested around the integrations between Snap and Snowflake, there's loads of changes coming down the line with SAP moving to the cloud, how that integrates with Snowflake. Really good webinar coming up around SAP integrations and zero kind of ETL to get your data into Snowflake. And then if you're into, again, in finance kind of world, interested in fraud detection, another really interesting webinar coming up around how to build prompt engineering using a lot of Snowflake Cortex functions to build real-time fraud detection models. So go and check it out on the Snowflake events website. There's loads and loads of events there. Cool. We're going to keep a similar format to last month, where we went through some kind of release notes. In terms of these are things that interest me. If you guys have things that interest you, then you let me know and you can come and stand up here. But these are some of the things that have been released in the last month. So there's something called an interval data type. There's a new function called array repeat. I'll quickly touch on something called, or a new attribute called scheduler in dynamic tables. And then finally, we have check constraints. So interval data type is quite interesting. Really, it's to start storing interval data, not time data. So there's 2 different types of interval data type. There's ones for storing information around years and months, and there's another one to store information around days and times. And you store it in this kind of strange format, very textual, so that 14-04 is a way for you to express that it's 14 years and 4 months. So this is a really simple way for you to start managing duration information, as opposed to trying to work with it as dates and times and trying to do interesting math. This is how it looks. So this is how you declare it on the left-hand side, where it says the type. So these are the actual kind of declarations that you make in SQL. And then these are examples of how you define those different time periods. So if you say the interval is in years, then the number there represents years. If you say it's years to months, then the expression there is 2 years and 6 months, and so on and so forth. So this is how you can express years and months in intervals. And then similarly, you can do a similar thing with time attributes as well. So now you're storing text instead of storing numerical information as timestamps. And the cool thing about it is you can do a lot of arithmetic and a lot of kind of analysis with these timestamps. So I'm going to got a couple of little demos just to kind of whet the appetite. You can go away and mess around with these things. So here we've defined an interval. There's my expression for that interval, and then I've expressed the actual kind of precision there. So this is expressed in hours. I want to be able to, the precision of that is up to 2 hours. So actually you can go up to 99 in terms of 99 hours. Oops. and then the precision being how many seconds do you want it to be able to go out to. So how that kind of maps is something like this. So the hours represents like how many hours you want, and the seconds represents the precision of hours, and that's how it works for all of the different data types. So hopefully you can see this, but there's a little bit of a demo here. I like recording them in advance because otherwise they tend to go wrong. But here I'm basically expressing all of those different kind of data types, and I'll make some of these scripts available so you can go and mess around with it yourselves. But basically you're just having to declare like the text, and you can see there's some date timestamps there. And here literally all you have to do is declare a date, and then you can just add an interval to that. Here, for example, if you've got transactional data, so here's some kind of fake orders information. I've got a date, and then the rest of the information there is various different intervals. So if you were tracking something through a business process, or you're tracking an order out to delivery, then you can actually get something that looks like this, the original order date, and then the various different intervals for those different timestamps. And then hopefully what you can see in the sequel there is that you can start adding these different intervals together. And it doesn't matter what combination they are, whether they're dates and times or in hours and seconds, you can add those intervals together, add them to a date, and produce an outcome. So that is the interval data type. You can go and nerd out on that. Why would you want to use it? It makes it much, much more kind of specific. So you can basically, within your actual schema itself, you can define what that column actually represents in terms of duration. So you can't have any ambiguity as to, if that number says 5, you can go and look at the schema and say, oh, it represents 5 hours or 5 days or 5 months. And so there's no like ambiguity there. And it limits the need to do any kind of manual conversion. So typically when you're doing these things with dates and times, you're doing a lot of kind of math to kind of convert stuff. You can optimize the storage, so no longer storing these large data types potentially, but you can store very small textual kind of data types. Optimized for actually doing this kind of math. It now complies with the ANSI standard, which it didn't before. And as I mentioned before, it's like got a self-documenting schema. So a cool interval data type was released this month. Next thing I wanted to show you is this really like simple function, but it's called array repeat. So basically you can define an element and then specify how many times you want it to go and produce that. So in this example, I'm creating a blank piece of text and asking it to go and produce that 5 times. Not very exciting on its own right, but what you can do with it is if you wanted to start building some sample data, then you can use it in combination with the flatten and the table function to start producing like rows of data that you can work with. And then you can use things like the index column here to help you like produce some sample data. Typically how we used to do this was using these other functions called generate, and maybe you'd use things like row number, and that would produce you a list of numbers. Or you'd use this other one that generates with a sequence function. And each of them has pros and cons, but this one specifically allows you to declare exactly what kind of numerical scale that you want to use and with a level of confidence. And then you can start doing things like this where you can start to produce like sample data sets, randomized numbers, and produce stuff that you can go and explore with. Some other kind of interesting use cases if you've got missing data. So for example here, let's say these were teams that played in various different matches, but they were supposed to have played like maybe 5 different matches. We want to try and fill the blanks in those lists of matches. We can use various different array functions that concatenate things together, create a list of blank numbers and basically combine them all together. And then if you really want to nerd out, you can basically transpose that and put that back into rows. So interesting things that you can do. There's loads of array functions that allow you to manipulate things and produce like data sets and solve quite complicated like ETL problems normally. This will be really quick. Dynamic tables. Hopefully you guys have been using dynamic tables. So it's a way of doing declarative programming. So traditionally, if you've done ETL type work, you've kind of moved data through kind of extract stage and data warehouse or through your bronze, silver, gold layers. With dynamic tables, it's completely different. You're doing declarative programming. You're not moving data. You're letting Snowflake worry about how to build things behind. One of the challenges was that when you built these things, you set the target lag. And that was basically it. It went and refreshed itself automatically every 5 minutes in this example. Now they've put this new keyword in their scheduler, and you can either have it enabled or you can have it disabled. And if it's disabled, it basically will only refresh if you tell it to. So that way you have a lot more control as to when those actual dynamic tables are actually being updated. So again, a little example of how this can work. So I'm literally just going to put some sample data here into a table. It's product widgets or orders. So here we've got some sample data. I'm creating a dynamic table. It's got 3 rows of data in it, I think. There we go. Here I'm disabling the actual schedule. So it's now disabled in this version of the query. Still only got 3 rows. But now if I insert data into the kind of source table, and I start to try and read from that dynamic table, nothing has changed yet. And so this is the new kind of line of code that you need, which is alter the dynamic table and hit refresh. And it will tell you in here what it's actually done. So here I can see that I've inserted 1 record, whether I've modified any. And now if I go back to that dynamic table, I can see that my 4 records of data are in there. So just a nice way for you to be able to manage that. That was something that has been on their backlog for quite some time. And then finally, another little thing that they released is check constraints. If you come from a Microsoft Oracle, traditional database environment, check constraints is kind of bread and butter. You could put them in Snowflake previously, but it didn't do anything with them. So now they are there. You can enforce them or you cannot enforce them. So if you enforce them, obviously, as you insert data, update, copy, or merge data, it will validate against those. If you use the not enforced keyword, it's essentially just metadata. So you're saying these are kind of rules for that column, but the Snowflake's not going to enforce those. An example of some of the kinds of, so the way in which the check constraints work is there have to be a function that returns a true or false, a Boolean kind of response. So I'm just creating some sample data again. So I've got some random product information. And so here I'm going to alter the table and add a constraint. You can see that the check constraint is where the price is greater than 0, so it's either true or false, or where the cost is greater than 0, or where the quantity is greater than 0. So these are very basic check constraints. And now if I try to insert a record that violates those, it's going to give me some error message which describes which constraint's actually been breached. It won't go and check all of the constraints. It will fail at the first one. So if you go and fix something and run it again, it could still break. Here, the constraints get a little bit more sophisticated. So here we're doing range-based constraints. So here I've got like an in clause looking for a particular type of transaction or a range of numbers between 0 and 100. And again, it's going to fail if I try and insert records which breach those constraints. And then the final one that you can do is you can do constraints which compare columns to each other. So is the original price greater than the cost, or is the end date greater than the start date? So you've got various different constraints that you can build and you can use to actually control entry. There's a lot of caveats to this. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll go and check out the documentation. There's lots of limitations as to how or where you can use them. That's everything from me. I'm going to introduce our speaker this evening, who's going to talk to us about how Allan Gray is delivering their enterprise intelligence. So before I get Ron to come up on stage, Ron is a data scientist, is a rocket scientist, like legitimately. So he's got a master's degree in, what is it? Rocket scientist? Aeronautical engineering, I apologise. He's worked for Allan Gray for 8.5 years, leading their data analytics and data science team. Ron's genuinely a very nice guy, and I'm looking forward to hearing him present this evening. So over to you.
Yeah, not a rocket scientist. We were actually working more on air conditioning and that. No, joke. But yeah, it was quite a nice transition to finance because air conditioning does work well then. I don't have to worry about it. But yeah, I've been at Allan Gray, like Douglas said, for 8.5 years. I think Douglas also worked at Allan Gray a while ago. Did they have computers back then? No, I'm just joking. Douglas has actually done some great work and things that we still use today. Is everyone familiar with what Allan Gray is or who we are? It's not a bursary program or purely a bursary. Typically what we hear from grads, we are across the pond from here. Hopefully your retirement's doing well. So yeah, we can get them up, but that's not why we're here today. We hear more about the data. That's really what I worry about at Allan Gray. I let the investment team guys worry about fund performance. And then obviously there's a lot of turmoil in the world that we can't control. But we try to be right at least more than half the time. And the data that we have in the background definitely helps us get there. So Allan Gray is not purely just investments. Obviously, that's the bread and butter of what we do. But we also a platform business, which means we've got a big retail and institutional proponent, which means we've got a lot of clients, we've got a lot of data, we've got a lot of decisions that we have to make, we've got a lot of teams supporting direct clients or advised clients. And really for us to help deliver the best client service, we have to have the best systems in place. So we've gone through a journey since I've been there, not quite the paper-based solutions that Douglas worked on, but we were more SQL Server, Python, working with CSVs, trying to start off the data science team. So that was in 2018 when I think we went through the same hype cycle that we're going through now with AI. I think data science was a word that landed on some of the execs' tongues, and they wanted to start a data science team without a clear mandate of what they wanted to do. So I landed there 2018. Okay, we're there. What are we going to solve? So completely open slate. So for me, it felt like a continuation of varsity to some extent. We've definitely learned a lot since then. Fast forward to where we are today, we're pretty much using Snowflake as our bread and butter data platform solution. Now I'll skip to the next. Let's use this. Cool. So maybe why we needed a change, and just a disclaimer here. This is the same presentation from a couple of weeks ago at the Snowflake thing. Peter Wood was with me, our data architect. He's not here today, clearly. So I'm also just presenting on some of his slides. So some of it might not be as coherent as when he spoke about it. But we really needed a change in terms of aligning to industry best practices. We're running into some resourcing constraints with analytical capabilities and data increasing, a lot of on-premise data at the time. So we typically had this thing called a kill bill, where we'd run a query for 30 minutes and the query would just cut out. And obviously in a world of like data analytics, just accessing data and getting it before you can actually draw insights, that's quite painful. So then we started moving more into this world where we chunk and sort of query in smaller batches for account numbers or investor SIFs or whatever, and store it as CSVs locally. And that's also not a world that you really want to work in. So we really needed a change. We worked off of this database called self-service, which really wasn't self-service. It was just us hacking away and trying to make things work. There's a lot of inconsistencies, like in how we presented data to make business decisions. So yeah, it wasn't really a good look on us, and we convinced business that we needed a new sort of underlying technology. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into the detail around that, but at the core of it, we wanted to empower business users to be able to drive business decisions with data independently in a true self-service way, and have all the data completely governed, where we didn't need to really like worry about, okay, this team needs specific access. We could define, what column, a specific team or user has access to, what masking is applied. So we went through a whole process of reviewing a whole bunch of external vendors and solutions. I'm not sure if I can mention all the names or if I should, but we pretty much landed on Snowflake for various reasons. And we came up with the first use case to essentially deliver the value, to price it, to spec it. Data Lab was also involved there from the start to help us spec it and to also help sort out a lot of the orchestration in the background. This is one of the slides that Peter spoke to at the conference, but this just shows pretty much what we built from an architectural point of view. When I say we, Peter and the team. So we've got a lot of operational database systems that obviously ingest data as and when it sort of arrives on our systems. So what we essentially moving to Snowflake is a copy of that data. Some of it sort of intraday, some of it, daily. A lot of dynamic tables going on in the background. We have code-based ETL. We use DAGs as our orchestration layer, and a bit of DPT for the transforms. From there, we create different views. We've started moving more into some of the semantic views to enable some of the AI functionality, and I'll speak to that in a bit. And we've also starting to venture more into that space where we created Cortex agents for various analysis and processes. The bit that we still bedding down is the delivery of the insights. Obviously, a lot of people use Power BI. That is something that we use quite a bit. I think there's a lot of work that we can do to improve, the visualization in Power BI. Like, I think the standards are quite up in the air. There are a lot of dashboards that exist. A lot of it's not really being updated, but I also think that insights aren't really visual anymore. Insights could also be textual. It could be semantic. And Snowflake's definitely helping us get there. If there are any questions so far on any of this, I can help. I can try talk to any of the technicalities. Okay, we move on. Yeah. Cool. Some technical lessons that we've learned. This, obviously, without the actual numbers, shows our credit consumption and our costs. And what Peter really tried to show here was that there is a cyclicality around learning. Whenever we've onboarded a new data set, operational data set, there's been these spikes where they've become a little bit more familiar with orchestration best practices. For example, in a lot of our ForgeRock security data, they also played around with some of the JSON parsing, which initially what they used was quite computationally heavy, and then they experimented with different things. I think they reached out to Snowflake as well, and then the cost goes down and we get to a state of more steady state. So we definitely factored in from a technical perspective that there was going to be some sort of learning. But from a business point of view, we also try to keep our actual ingestion and loading at like 20% of the monthly or yearly usage, and then really open up like 80% of the credit consumption for business usage, because at the end of the day, it's really the data and the insights that drive the value, not just landing the data there for archiving purposes. We actually want to draw insights from it so we can make more business decisions. But yeah, what has changed for us? This is pretty much where I started off at the presentation the last time. And I summarize it by saying that I pretty much enjoy my work now. I really look forward to going to work and opening up my laptop. We, as the data science team that serves quite a big footprint in the retail institutional business, we very Python based. Increasingly so, I think we're doing a lot more of our work in SQL, natively in Snowflake, just because it's a little bit closer to the data, it's a little bit more efficient, and with things like Cortex code really assisting you, it really becomes easier to draw insights from the data. We don't have these siloed data sets that sit locally on people's devices anymore. Everything is shared, in role-based access within Snowflake. So I think there's well over 10 different role groups in terms of how we set it up, in terms of what access teams and departments have data to. Within those, there's probably like 6 to 8 different users in a role group. So really, like, the Snowflake usage is taking off in the business, specifically retail. So it's become more of a shared data platform. We definitely don't have local extracts anymore. I can't remember when I've done that to CSV from pandas, and thankfully so. And data isn't just structured. We don't just think of data as being structured data, and I'll speak to that in a bit when we get to the use cases. Textual data, with the rise of LLM and Gen AI, is also a data source for us. Like, we can feed a lot more data, from textual PDFs, unstructured data, and really embed that into our Snowflake environment, and then serve that and mix it with structured data to draw insight from that. There's far fewer manual prep tasks that run where we have to kick off something, or someone asks us, can you quickly refresh this view or provide me with this? We have scheduled tasks, and that's all within the Snowflake environment. One of our models is a client profitability model where we track, pretty much daily what an account generates for us in terms of revenue. We can work out the cost and profit. So it's well over 100 million rows that refreshes in under 15 minutes on the smallest t-shirt size in Snowflake. So in terms of business value, that wouldn't have been possible with the previous systems we used. And if you quantify that to a number, that's a quarter of a credit pretty much, which I think is like just over $1. So we essentially, refreshing that sort of data set repeatedly to draw like real-time board-level insights for business decisions for 15 Rand, whereas previously it wouldn't have been possible. And Snowflake has really become part of the language at the various levels in terms of, the data, what we have available, what we can do. And that all has led to more repeatable insights. We're able to reproduce, regenerate data sets, try out different assumptions, and really drive a bit more of a data culture. I think there's a question.
Just one thing you mentioned, it sounded really interesting.
Yeah.
Double back, maybe a bit more insight. But it sounded like something about textured data, so getting external data and bringing it into Snowflake.
Yeah.
To use that with your own internal data.
Yeah.
Maybe just, that sounded really interesting. Maybe you could give us an example.
Sure.
Where you get that data from and how you know it's ready.
Yeah. So, let's maybe start at where we wanted to start, which was our operational data. So we've got systems like the Mart, got Flex data, we've got like Siebel data. Some of these might not mean anything to you, but essentially it's like client interaction data. It could be security data. It could be client information around like what units they hold in specific funds, not just our funds, but funds from other managers. Obviously, the more static details about an investor. So those tables and databases live as more of a prod analytics is what we label all of the big data sources that we're ingesting into Snowflake, and they're proper ETL processes that run for that intraday or daily. And that's essentially becoming the more self-serve environment with some views on top of that, where a lot of the, for example, assets under management is already computed for you. You don't have to go and recreate views every day for a specific user. It's just done and you can use it. Different teams might have different mandates, and I think that's where ingesting data into Snowflake has become quite powerful. And those teams operate, say, in like client experience, where you could maybe want to see what is a specific client has he or her called about previously in the past. You want to supplement that with some maybe of the call transcripts, obviously within the right realms of what's allowed in terms of privacy. Teams are now able to upload their own data, create their own views, create their own tables within their own databases. And we can marry, if you've got your primary key, that data to the more structured, repeatable data that we ingest to draw further insights from it.
Just last.
Yeah.
So are we talking about external data that's still part of companies, or are we talking about like external data provider, like packages?
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit of both. So on the investment team side, we're definitely ingesting external data. They're third-party vendors that we've looked at, like for news aggregation, whatever's available sort of on the marketplace. We can also ingest things there. Typically, if it's available on the marketplace, and obviously just enable access, and then you can link it up. If there's a CUSIP ID, for example, for a company, then you could link that up to, say, the CUSIP ID that speaks to investment notes on a specific company. So it's definitely a bit of that, and it's definitely venturing more into that space. On the more retail side, where we have to keep track of different funds, and this is a piece of work that Data Lab's going to help us out with in the next while, we have to report on different underlying asset allocations. That just shows, for example, a specific fund holds 10% local net equities, 30% foreign net equities. We have to keep track of that for offshore capacity constraints, but also for behavioral insights. That we source from, it seems cumbersome, but we source that because it is the source of truth from fund fact sheets. So ingesting PDFs, some of them you need to apply a bit of OCR, others you can just do text to markdown, and then contextually you could probably, we're going to get there, but you could then infer like what the asset allocations are from the structured tables, or if there's a graph, you could do some image processing on the, so yeah, I think that's where some of the external data, but we're never eliminating the human from the loop. It's probably still going to have some sort of sense check on the asset allocation values for a fund for the previous months and see if it's completely out of range. You wouldn't expect a fund to move completely out of its mandate. Yeah, sorry, I went into a bit of detail there, but yeah, it's definitely enabled teams to use it in whichever way they want to. Yeah. Early use cases. This was important for us, as I mentioned earlier. We started with a very specific use case. So distribution for us is, you could almost think of them as a team of reps, like medical reps that go out to advisors, build a relationship with them, talk to them. They have a lot of notes that they take. They understand, what servicing requirements advisors would have. Because Allan Gray, we don't give advice. We're not licensed to give advice. But we build relationships with advisors that do give advice and that do have a lot of underlying clients, like some of them over 5,000. So there's a lot of rich relationship data there. And those systems were pretty much a mess, and we wanted to marry that with some of our CRM systems. So we started with a distribution use case to understand, some of those relationships, the underlying advisor-client relationships, and what that means. And then we pretty much built it out from there into this whole self-service thing where we could empower like analytical teams to start, creating their own views, repeatable insights, like I mentioned, the client profitability view. And then really where we got to was this place, unexpected place, I would say, where, and Douglas spoke to it earlier, where Snowflake just keeps releasing more and more features, and it's difficult to keep your head above the water with it. And like AI was almost like an unintended consequence of that. So we're starting to do a lot more of our work, AI sort of testing and prototyping in Snowflake. I'll maybe speak to that. I just need to remember what slide is next. So yeah, there's this unexpected benefit. Yeah.
You mentioned that
Yeah. So just
you mentioned that you
yeah. So when you call into our call center, none of the consultants should tell you to invest in a specific fund, because according to the regulatory body, we don't hold the right, and by design, we don't want to even apply for that license. It gets into sort of like a treacherous space, like there's reputational risk associated with that. So we rather partner with what we call independent financial advisors, or just short advisors. They have the right licenses. It could either be a category 1 or category 2 license, where they could make decisions either for or on behalf of their client, like choose what fund they need to be in at a specific point of time, even without getting permission from the client to do that. So they're independent to like us, but they do business with us on our platform. Does that make, yeah. So, yeah, this unexpected benefit, and unfortunately, like I can't give a real live demo, but I can maybe speak to it. What we wanted to get right, and there is a big cultural element to this data foundation, was to actually just get the right data into Snowflake in the right format so that we can do all of the top layer things with that data. The dark blue, the AI bit, as I mentioned, was not intended from the Snowflake point of view, but when we were in talks, like more of the stuff was actually taking off, like LLMs, ChatGPT, all of the stuff became very topical, and I think probably also saw that they needed to stay in touch with that and embed that into their platform as a new line of business. So in the middle, we have that bit that all the analytical teams operate in, like where there's building dashboards, building reporting, building sort of views on for business stakeholders to drive business decisions. That's your typical analytical layer. But what we're starting to see more now is this place where you can talk to your data. And I don't know how many of you have used Snowflake or are using it currently, but I think their branding is more like Cortex. So all of their AI functionality is like Cortex Search, Cortex analysts, the Cortex agents for the orchestration, and sort of their front-end tool that you can use to expose a lot of this is Snowflake Intelligence. More recently, they brought out that Cortex code or SIST. I can't remember exactly what the jargon is, but that's essentially like an embedded. You saw it on Douglas' thing. It looks like a little star with a light blue thing. That's really like crack because makes your work really, really easy because you can just tell it to get you a piece of data to write a query for you, or you can copy an old SQL query and convert it into T-SQL, and it understands without you even saying that this means investor name, this is the column name. It goes and finds all of the relative. Obviously, you still need to validate that it's correct, but it understands the structure of your data and your system. And it can troubleshoot for you. It was free for a long time. They started charging or billing. So there have been a lot of unhappy people at work sick in the past week because we've run out and we've had to like actually put credit allocations on that just while we understanding the cost because they can ramp up quite quickly. Especially when there's a new intern that just wants to use the most hyped up model, Claude 4 Sonnet or Opus or whatever, and all of a sudden that's orders of magnitude more expensive than your baseline model. So we've definitely seen some, we'll call them learnings there, with the financial consequence. But yeah, at least we're tracking far lower than our credit consumption trajectory for the 3-year period that we contracted for. Yeah.
How are you dealing with these data? You're giving it to different teams, right?
Yeah.
And is it you validating what you're getting back from the AI? How are you doing that validation?
So it's less about validating what the AI gives you back, but it's actually writing structured SQL for you and giving you a structured output. So you can validate more the output. I don't really care if it misunderstood or misspelled something, or it's completely ring-fenced in your environment. Like you can, and I'll speak to it about the investment knowledge agent that we built, but you can open like web access to it. But from what I understand, this is completely contained within the Snowflake environment. Like we're on a private link, so I don't think anything's leaving our account in that sense. It's completely contained in our environment. It understands, I'm sure, what their documentation is, the latest in the version in the background there. Some of these newer blog post feature that Douglas also spoke about that I'm sure you can also just ask Cortex code, to tell you about. Anyway, yeah, so we're not too worried about the hallucinations in that sense here.
Yeah, I think we're building some Cortex models.
Yeah.
And they are quite expensive.
Yeah.
I wonder what type of ways you could mention using a cheaper model. If there's anything else you try it out that can optimize that.
So which Cortex model, like more the search or the analyst or? Yeah, I mean, you can definitely set like obviously which models you want to use there. We're being quite generous with that at the moment because we are still experimenting. But we have set credit limits like on some of the AI functionality, and like Douglas knows a little bit better about this, but there are different, I think, credit consumption limits like around that. Like there's the in-SQL one and there's the more sort of Cortex, if I'm not mistaken. We are keeping track of that, and we've got monitors put in place where, it doesn't need to think that deep and blend semantic or textual data with more structured queried data. We obviously just enable the lowest tiered LLMs. Yeah, but yeah, we did have an incident 2 weeks ago where we didn't call them an intern, but they're like rotational candidates where they essentially enabled Claude 4 Sonnet on fairly rudimentary task, like to parse JSON files. Something that you could have just write a function for, and quickly racked up tens of thousands of rands. But yeah, it's because we also didn't have the right limits in place at that stage, or the monitors. But yeah, like there are definitely ways around that. But maybe let me speak to what we are doing in that space. So I mentioned that we do a bit of work for our investment team. Our investment team is a team of 20 plus, just over 20 people that research a specific company. They actively research it, which means that they actually look at the fundamentals of a company. So they go and do sort of first principle research. They meet with management. When they've met with management, they capture contact notes. They write a report at the end of the month. They keep track of results when it's released. They look at the financial statements and essentially make a view or form a view about a company, where they're going in terms of what the intrinsic value is, and they value it and see if it's over or underpriced. All of that information is pretty much unstructured data. It's PDF documents that have been generated from the early 90s. Some of it, the contact notes are even from the 1970s that we've captured into a system, but no one's ever actually built a system over that to be able to talk to it. And the unintended consequence for us was that, we could actually build an agent, a RAG, a knowledge agent, over all of that data. So what we have built over all those data types, like the contact notes, the policy group meeting minutes, the analyst notes when they're capturing different opinions, their policy group reports, which are 30 plus page PDF reports. There are tens and thousands of these reports with a lot of detail about a company at different points in time. Initially, they try to put I think Copilot agents in SharePoint, just pointing it to SharePoint over these tens of thousands of documents and complaining that it's not giving them even the right name of a file. I mean, unsurprisingly so. Within a week, we were pretty much able to build a knowledge agent for them by staging, a swatch of PDF documents. It chunks it. There's overlapping, like all of the things that you should be doing. There's the text to markdown, like all of that stuff is handled for you quite easily with like as low code or as high code as you want. Initially, I started a little bit more low code, but then it actually goes and forms the embedding layer for you with the Cortex search, which is typically where you want to start when you've ingested textual document and you have it in a more structural format with the metadata and everything. And then from there, you can either create like a Cortex analyst and sort of bring that all through into your Cortex agent. So we've combined like all of the different data sources into a single knowledge agent for the investment team that's now unlocked, 30 plus years worth of institutional knowledge for them, that they can just ask something about how has our view changed over time by this theme, how does it compare and contrast to this external view, like what are some of the blind spots that we haven't captured? Like when was the last time we gave a buy rating for this company? And the PMs and investment analysts are really talking to this agent as if, it's their research assistant. For now, we're just using Snowflake intelligence because we don't want to really commit too much from the development side because the things are moving so quickly and we're still experimenting, we're still learning. But it's really been great. Like costs have been coming down in terms of the models, and the models have been improving as well. We have inline citations. They are quite a skeptical bunch. So whenever something is referenced from our relational database, it gives you a hyperlink that I've structured so that they can click through. It'll take them right to their research portal where the raw text and data is, that they can actually go and validate the output and see that there weren't any hallucinations. So we're slowly building up this like confidence that Snowflake is more than just your cloud native or cloud database technology. It's becoming fully fledged in terms of scheduling tasks. You can embed Python functionality so you can do more complicated like analysis. But on top of that, we're exposing some of this intelligent Cortex functionality over it. It might not be the final place where all of that ends, but for now, we don't have any cons about using it. We've got the credits. Some people burn them quicker than others, but we're making good use of them. And on top of that, an agent you can call as an API. So if you wanted to embed that agent into the other productionized research platform that they've got. We can just provision that API for them with the right PAT access. So it really is great in that sense. And we really haven't committed that much time, energy, and sort of resources to get there. Some of the lessons learned, and this might bore some of the technical folk, but it's unfortunately some of the stuff that I have to report back on. That data modeling is as much of a business problem as it is, a data or technical issue. We've had to form committees and councils around just discussing and agreeing and aligning on what data we bring into Snowflake. It can quickly get as messy as our previous self-service environment where people are just throwing things into this relational database. It's a very measured approach. We sort of nominate one big operational data set to bring in at a point in time. But before we even do that, we understand how it's going to be used, who's going to use it, what naming conventions are business friendly, so that people understand when they see and query the data, what everything means without even having massive documentation or a data dictionary there. Obviously, the goal is to have a good data dictionary, but the logic is that intuitive. We also try and have as much reuse as possible. Sure, business initially thought Snowflake's going to be so expensive, but because there's so much reuse and because things are so efficient and streamlined, we're saving a lot of time. People are empowered to do their job. People come to work and enjoy their job a bit more. And through that, data decisions are driven a lot more easily. I don't know what I really wanted to say with the last one there, but yeah, adoption drives value. Yeah. And then what's next for us? As I mentioned, we'll continue to expand the data foundations, get the right data into Snowflake. For us, it was sort of a staged approach, but we're quite happy. And like I said, Snowflake's really become part of the dictionary, part of the language across the various levels. Actually, the other day, we started off a data analyst connect session. All these very hypey names, but it felt a little bit like a Snowflake anonymous session where people were just talking for the first 30 minutes about their positive experiences in Snowflake and how much they enjoy their job now. So that's great, and it's just interesting and cool to really learn from one another. And I think it's very similar to this group, but it's actually people from the same business sharing the same data language. And on top of that, we're also moving to a better license agreement, I think, with Power BI, because what we struggled with was we had this Power sort of Pro and Premium license, and now we're moving to Fabric 64, I think. So everyone will have viewership, but only a couple of Power users will actually create the dashboard. So that really helps us to be able to share data across the business, share insights, and have a couple of key people focus on the actual modeling in the background. And I think all of this really leads to a more enabled, AI-enabled workflow beyond just what business thinks ChatGPT and Claude and things can do for you. It's really powerful when your data is actually connected to the Snowflake and the AI engines behind it. Yeah, a little bit cheesy, I think, for this forum, but what changes when data becomes easy to use? For us, it's really been the culture. Yeah, people are actually talking about what they want to do next. They know what's possible, and what is possible is just continuously expanding, because continuously building on that foundation that we so painfully had to improve on, since 2018, since I've been there. And you can really see incremental change. You can see incremental progress, and through that, yeah, hopefully we change the culture. Yeah, that's that.
One question. I'm not sure if I misunderstood you there, but when you connect Snowflake into your LLMs, ChatGPT, whatever, how do you manage your data governance?
So it's all within Snowflake. You essentially access the various models. I don't think we're even using any of the OpenAI models because we're not on the Cape Town instance, we're on the EU. So I think at the moment they're more Claude based. They used to be, I can't remember how I pronounce them, Mistral, but they've since, I think, moved away from that. So everything is and the benefit of that is that you're consuming the credits on your Snowflake account. The pricing is fairly comparable, but it means that you don't have to worry about billing, through OpenAI and too many of the, like everything's in Snowflake. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're going to Fabric, and now with your users interacting with the data via Fabric, do you want to start using some of the Fabric features like writing back and then ingesting that, or is it purely a cost thing and you want to, just keep using or use Fabric to deliver the data but not to interact?
I think definitely if we could get to a place where we can interact, it would be great. We actually have that more interaction basically through D365, more for the distribution. So that CRM system is there, but I wouldn't imagine we'd necessarily have it for all of the business users, but maybe where you're vetting, the outputs of an LLM or interacting with data, like it could be a good place to start. Yeah.
You mentioned you consume social data sensitive.
Yeah.
So with that, I assume some of it is sensitive information. How do you manage what you consume, what is relevant?
Like sensitive.
Consume all sensitive information that you consume. Because some of it might be relevant to certain teams.
Yeah.
Some of it saying limited to certain companies.
Okay.
Some sensitive information might be cross companies, other companies.
Yes. So, I mean, I guess you're talking about the investment team agents, and when you're talking about companies, it's the companies that are being researched. So, in those research documents, like a lot of the competitor analysis does actually cover some of other companies that might be relevant for the question that someone is asking through the Snowflake intelligence interface. I guess the vector embedding obviously understands it takes your question, your prompt, and converts it back into that embedding space and see sort of what is closest to it. We're not filtering anything sort of in the raw data, we're just ingesting everything. And users are actually testing the outputs. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but yeah.
In using sort of the generative BI capabilities within Cortex, so its ability to visualize certain pieces of data directly, how do you guys think about that versus just static data?
That is a good question. So see with Cortex analysts, like I think to graph something, to plot a line chart, to tabulate things, it becomes really easy. And the big distinction between Cortex analysts and sort of the Cortex or Cortex search is that it's actually going and writing a SQL query in the background in most instances. So it's essentially doing what I would imagine Cortex code is doing. It's understanding your question, it's writing a structured query, and then from there it's obviously giving you a bit more of a structured output, which then becomes easier to like visualize. We're not doing too much in terms of just forcing a visualization on the Cortex output. It depends on what the question is. If the user actually wants to visualize something, we're giving them the ability to do it, and that comes through the orchestration layer. So we've spent quite a bit of time refining the actual response and the orchestration instruction. There's a weird world that we live in now because apparently when things go wrong at these LLM companies, it's no longer just purely data engineers that they come in to fix things. They get psychologists in to actually understand like what the reasoning and thought process is behind things. So we constantly go back and forth to improve the orchestration, instruction, and the response outputs so that it understands like what you're asking for. When you're asking it to chart something, obviously it needs to hard force that, but it should be an option, not a hard rule. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Ron. Well, it's come to that time in the evening. If you're new, this is where the excitement ramps up an octave. It's quiz time. If If you've got your phones at the ready, if you scan the QR code, you'll be taken hopefully to something that's up and running. Let's just check. So you should be taken to Slido. Hopefully it's up and running. Let's make sure that it's... There we go. People are signing up. That's wicked. We've got these very... You've seen them before, or maybe you haven't, but tonight, up for grabs, is some Snowflake camping mugs. Okay. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. There's 9 questions. Hopefully you've been listening. Hopefully we've given you all the answers. Okay, is everyone set? Yeah? Cool. The excitement is palpable. Okay, we're going to start with an easy one. We're going to start with an easy one. Where is Snowflake Summit this year? One option.
In London.
Alrighty, let's see. Well done, 94% of you did very well. The rest of you are gamblers or thrill seekers. Okay, second question. Now they're going to start to get harder. What keyword makes a check constraint reject bad data? I barely mentioned it, but it was there in the sequel. We're not just giving these mugs away. You're going to have to earn them tonight. Oh, well done. 73% of you were well done. Cool. Which of the following are array repeat use cases? So that I demonstrated in the examples. 2 to choose. Okay, let's see who's... You went top and bottom. Well done. Which of these are benefits of interval data type? 3 options. So which one are you going to remove? Choose 3. Cool. This is the last technical question, and then we'll see who's leading the scoreboard. How do you say disable auto refresh on dynamic tables? How do you disable? Well done. Cool. Let's see who's leading the leaderboard. Oh, rapid debate. Your business. Okay, we're going to get into the second half now. We're going to, hopefully you were listening to Ron's presentation. 4 questions here that's going to decide top 2. Top 2 can get a mug this evening. Okay, what was a key challenge in Allan Gray's original analytics environment? Just one option to choose. Well done. Inconsistent and messy data. Okay, second question now. Which of the following were benefits moving to Snowflake? There's 3 options, so which one are you going to get rid of? Okay, let's see. Yeah, these are too easy. Okay. Which architectural component were part of their new solution? You saw the architecture diagram. Choose three. Well done. Everyone was listening, Ron. Great presentation. Cool. So where are we now? So questions. It's all try for no pressure. Okay. Are you ready? Is everybody ready? Okay, the final question. Here we go. Which unexpected benefit emerged from the new data platform? Choose one. It was a great diagram. Great presentation. Okay, final answer. Cool. So it's going to be predictable.
Yeah.
Well done, that. Okay. Well, that's a wrap from us. You guys can come up and get your prizes. Thank you for everyone joining us online. I think there's a few beers and stuff. Before you go, we have a simple rating scale. We ask you just to put your hand up. It's either you enjoyed it, not too sure, or I've got to take a photo. Cool. We're going to put it in AI. Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for coming. Look forward to seeing you next month.